All right, 3.2, we're going to continue looking at adding signed numbers, but now we're going to be looking at using the magnitudes to determine if our answer is positive or negative. So let's get started. A mountaineer is climbing on a cliff. So a cliff is above sea level. She is 400 feet above the ground. If she climbs up, this will be a positive change. If she climbs down, this will be a negative change. So all of the starting elevations are 400 feet, positive 400 feet, and the change is either going to be positive or negative. And we're going to have to determine what her final elevation is. Okay, so I'm at positive 400, and she's going 300 feet up. So if I'm starting at 400 and I'm going up another 300, then she's going to be at an elevation of 700 feet. Because if I was to write an equation for this, it would be 400 plus 300 equals 700. Okay, let's look at another one. If she is starting at 400 feet above sea level and she goes down 400 feet, okay, down is a negative change, so I'm adding a negative. So 400 plus negative 400. These are opposites, so when you add opposites to one another, it equals 0. So her final elevation is 0. All right, let's look at D. She's still starting at positive 400 feet, but this time we don't know what the change is. We just know this elevation, the final elevation. So I'm adding a number that's going to get me positive 50. So it's still positive. So if I do some quick mental math, I know that she has to go down 350 feet, because that's going to give me 50 feet final elevation. So 350 feet down is negative 350. All right, so now let's look at B. It says 400 feet starting elevation and then 150 feet down. So starting at 400 feet, I'm adding the negative 150 feet down. All right, so the question is, how do I determine what this value is? And what we can do is we're going to look at the magnitudes. Okay, so let's come over here. I have 400 and 150. Magnitudes is another way of saying absolute value. The absolute value of 400, or the magnitude of 400, is it's 400 units away from 0. Negative 150, the magnitude of negative 150 is 150 units from 0. So to help us determine if our answer is going to be positive or negative, we have to look at who has the largest magnitude, the largest distance away from 0. So in this case, 400 has the largest magnitude, and since it's positive, my answer is going to be positive. And your answer is the difference between the two. So I could take 400, subtract 150 from it, and that gives me 250 feet. And since we said that 400 has a larger magnitude, that means it's going to be positive. So my answer is positive 250 feet. So if we come down here, it says write in addition equation for 400. We already did that, but our equation would be 400 plus negative 150 equals 250. It's positive because the magnitude of 400 is larger than our negative magnitude. Okay, now we just need to draw a number line that shows that relationship. Remember, when we're doing our number lines, we always start at 0, and our first arrow leads to our first elevation. In this case, it's 400. And since I'm adding a negative value, it's a negative change, so I have to go to the left. And let's just call it about right there. So this is my adding negative 150 to a result of 250. Okay, let's look at another one. Number 2, A spelunker is down in a cave next to the cliff. If she climbs down deeper into the cave, this will be a negative change. If she climbs up, whether inside the cave or out of the cave, and up the cliff, this will be a positive change. So now our starting elevation is negative. The same idea though, we're still adding signed numbers. So let's get to this. I'm starting at negative 200 feet and I'm going down another 100 feet, 150 feet. So I'm getting more negative because I'm going down. So I can say negative 200 plus negative 150, because I'm going down again, is more negative, I mean. So it's negative 350 feet. When you're adding two negatives, it becomes more negative. All right, starting elevation is negative 200 feet, and I'm going up 100 feet. 200 has a larger magnitude, so if I take the difference between the two, 200 subtract 100, that gives me 100, and since 200 is negative, my answer is negative 100. Negative 200, starting elevation, and went up 200. I'm just adding opposites, so that equals 0. That's the easiest one. When you add two opposites, it equals 0. All right. Starting elevation is negative 200, and she climbs up 250 feet. Okay, we have opposite signs, so I need to determine the magnitude. 250 has a magnitude of 250. It's 250 units away from 0, whereas negative 200 has a magnitude of 200. Since this has a smaller magnitude, my answer is going to be positive, so it's going to be positive 50. It's positive 50 because I can take the difference between the two. So 250 subtract 200 gives me 50. And then since this has a larger magnitude and it's positive, my answer is positive. All right, last one. I'm starting at negative 200. I have to add some change to get to my final elevation, which was negative 500. Well, since it's negative, that means I know that this second number must be negative because I have to add two negatives. So that's going to be 300 because I know that 2 plus 3 is 5, and 200 plus 300 is 500, but the answer is negative. So it's negative 3, not negative 300, 300 feet down. Okay, write an equation for C and D. We already did that. So the equation for C is just the adding the opposite. So it's negative 200 plus 200 equals 0. And then for D, it's the magnitude become positive. Negative 200 plus 250 equals 50. Now we're just going to draw some number lines to demonstrate those two equations. Okay, so here's C. This is adding the opposites. This one's pretty easy because you should go right back to 0. So I'm starting at negative 200, but then I'm adding a positive 200. So I'm right back at 0. There is diagram C. Okay, for D, again, starting at 0, moving to negative 200, but I'm adding 250. So it's a positive change, and I'm going to be positive because 250 has a larger magnitude. So again, when we're trying to determine if my answer is positive or negative, you must look at the magnitude between your two values. So you need to find the difference, and whatever number has the largest magnitude, that determines the sign.